Hello, my name is Jeff Guillet. Thank you for coming to 20 Minutes to a Secure Environment. Thanks for coming all the way to Theater 9. For those of you who are watching this online, this place is really huge. And Theater 9 you really can't find from the other side of the conference center because of the curve of the earth kind of hides it. Okay, so let's start off talking about legacy authentication, what it is, why it's bad. I think you've heard a lot of this week. Legacy authentication is the term for basic auth. And because it's single factor, it's only a username and password, it's pretty easy to compromise. Password spray attacks are very, very common. It's the most common way that accounts are compromised. And just in the last 4 months, over 730,000 accounts have been compromised using basic auth. Almost 100%, just nearly 100%, were through password spray attacks. Password spray attacks are where somebody sends a password across multiple accounts, so it doesn't show up on intrusion detection systems because it's so infrequent within one tenant. It's hard to predict. So let's talk about your 3 best friends that you can use to protect yourself against legacy auth. First is to change legacy auth to use modern authentication. This is using an OAuth 2 token to go through a web flow and give you a SAML token, which you can use for authentication. It replaces basic auth. Everybody's familiar with that when they log into Office 365. It's the typical sign-in experience that you have. Once that's lit up, you're able to extend that and use things like multi-factor authentication, which is using a device that you have besides a username and a password that you know to authenticate. And beyond that, you can use conditional access to write policy rules around how MFA is employed in your environment. So let's talk about on-prem first. How many people here are on-prem or hybrid? That's almost everyone. Okay. If you are on-prem, you're my people, you are using, there is not going to be any modern auth for on-prem. Okay? You have to use hybrid modern auth to get modern authentication. It's pretty easy to set up. I did a 20-minute session last year. There's a link to it at the bottom. I highly encourage you to go watch that. It shows how to set up hybrid modern authentication for Exchange on-prem for both password hash sync and ADFS in lots of different scenarios. So once you have that set up, that will enlighten Exchange so that you can use MFA and conditional access. The high-level steps to configure it are you register the SPNs, the service principal names in Azure AD, and then on-prem you set your authorization server to be Evo STS, which is the Azure AD STS that handles modern auth. Once that's done, your clients can use modern authentication, MFA, and conditional access, like I mentioned. You can also, because Exchange is the biggest workload that can benefit from this, once you have modern auth enabled, you've got MFA enabled, you can extend that to other products in the Microsoft suite. So for example, if you're running a VPN, you might be able to use the Azure AD connector and then make your VPN use modern auth as well. So this is the gateway in. So if you're on-prem, this is what you need to do. So disabling legacy auth. Microsoft has announced that in October of next year, they're going to disable modern auth for all tenants. Okay? There's a lot of work that needs to go into that. There are a number of third-party applications that rely, and this applies to Exchange Online. So there are a lot of third-party applications like Jira that you currently use POP or IMAP for connectivity. POP and IMAP right now are not capable of using OAuth 2 and modern authentication. So there will be some updates that are going to come out in Q1 of next year that will enlighten POP and IMAP to use OAuth 2. And it's important to know that this is going to almost certainly require retooling or a different version of those third-party apps so that they can use modern auth. I know Jira, as an example, they're working toward that right now. So just be aware of that. And in the meantime, what I recommend is that you do an inventory of the systems that are out there that are using modern auth or basic auth now. Find out which ones that you know you need to touch later on. They're in the process, they being Microsoft, is in the process of putting together some reporting for us, so that we'll be able to see which applications and users are authing using basic auth. That's expected to come out in Q1 of next year as well. Moving on, one of the things you can do, you don't need to wait until October for this to happen. You can be proactive, and you can do that by using an authentication policy. An authentication policy tells either the entire org or specific users which applications are allowed to use, or which protocols are allowed to use basic auth. For the most part, what I recommend is you can disable basic auth definitely for the protocols you know you don't use. If you're a smaller org and you're just deploying Office 365 for the first time, it's unlikely you may even be using any of these, so you may be able to just turn them off right now. Authentication policies will be going away when they move to the newer model, because authentication policies can be changed, they can be disabled at this time. When they implement the change above, it's going to be always turned off, and you won't be able to control that, okay? So let's take a look at an authentication policy and how it works. Whoops. Okay, so I'm connected with Exchange Online Remote PowerShell right now, okay? And what I'm doing is creating a new authentication policy called No Basic Auth. And on this particular policy, if I don't specify any protocols that are allowed to use basic auth, it will turn them all off. So if I just ran the command, that new authentication policy, give it a name, and that's it, it will create a policy that has no basic auth at all for any of the 13 protocols that are listed here. Once you set the policy, that it's just a policy, but it hasn't been applied yet. So what you can do is, well, running from the top to the bottom, I've created the policy. You can see once it's created, it shows you the protocols that are allowed to use basic auth. In this case, we're allowing basic auth for POP. And then down at the bottom, what we're doing is testing this policy. You can test a policy by applying the policy to a user specifically, and they're the only ones that get that policy. Okay, so what I've done is on set user 2016, I've set the authentication policy to do no basic auth, and now I can test Outlook, I can test Outlook for Mac, whatever I'm running internally, there should be no issues with that user. If there are, you go back, remediate it, run through it. Once you're good with that, and you think that that's your good baseline, you can set it at the organizational level at the bottom commandlet. Set organization config default authentication policy, give it the name of the policy. If someone has a policy that's applied to the user, it will override the default. So I could set no basic auth at all for the entire org, and I can turn basic auth on in a special policy for POP just for my Jira service account, okay? So another really important thing that you should be doing for your environment is enabling password hash sync. Is there anybody in the room who does not have password hash sync enabled? We need to talk. So one person. So password hash sync is really important because it lights up a bunch of features that you can take advantage of, even if you're not using it. If you're using ADFS, the best practice is still to enable password hash sync so that you have some resiliency in case your ADFS infrastructure goes down. You can easily switch over to password hash sync and let your users log in. But even without ever doing that, you still get access to leak password protection, smart lockout, and IP lockout. What leak password protection does is it scans the web and the dark web looking for known passwords. And if you have a user who has a password that they're finding out on the web, it will show up in this report. And you can go to that user and say, hey, you're using password 123. Please change that. Make it something more complex. You can do more teaching with them. Smart lockout is where if you're going through password hash sync for your authentication, if the same account is locked out more than, or uses the wrong password from the same IP address more than 10 times, it will lock the account out for a minute. It stops it, and then you'll get alerts, or you can configure alerts, and it will show up on the reports here. IP lockout is more toward the password spray attacks. It's where it sees one IP address is doing multiple invalid logins to accounts all over the web or all over Office 365. That is probably the best way that we can determine password spray attacks. And then if you're using password hash sync for your authentication, you're authenticating directly to Azure AD, you get the improved reliability of the thousands and thousands of endpoints that users will use and applications will use to authenticate to the web. So what I want you to do is these things. This is what's really important to secure your environment. You should enable modern auth and MFA for everyone. This is the single best thing that you can do. It is a super easy win. You look like a rock star. Everybody's really impressed, and it goes off very smoothly in almost all cases. Use conditional access to secure your accounts and external access with MFA. Set it up smartly. Figure out which ones need to use MFA. You can use this to control. The MFA can be your gateway to determine whether or not somebody gets access if you want. So if they're not enrolled for MFA, they can't get access, and you control your access to enroll MFA. The important thing to know about MFA is repetition is not good. Getting MFA prompts all the time is not where we want to be. We want to get an MFA prompt once per user, per device, per password. If I'm getting an MFA challenge when I'm sitting there at my desk and I'm not doing anything that should have caused that MFA prompt, I should be calling my IT department. Or I should be worried. I definitely don't want to hit approve. So if I'm a worker who's sitting at my desk, I'm enrolled for MFA the first time, I'll get that MFA challenge. I should never get it again unless I move to a different PC or I change my password. Create authentication policies like we talked about. Set a default auth policy that blocks all legacy auth, and then set specific policies for the user accounts that need it. Enable password hash sync. That turns on leak password protection, smart lockout, and IP lockout like I talked about. And consider using the Microsoft best practices security settings. Now that replaced what used to be called the baseline policies in conditional access. Those are no more. Is anybody using those? Nobody, one person. Okay, consider using that. If you're a larger org, I definitely wouldn't use it. If you're a smaller org, it's really easy. And basically, when you turn that on, it disables basic authentication across your tenant, all of it. It turns on MFA for admin accounts, turns on more auditing. It's got different features. They're still kind of rolling this out. But in a larger org, it's kind of hidden in properties of your Azure Active Directory tenant. And they're hoping to move it forward more, but there still needs to be a little more documentation about what it's doing, because first time we turned it on and it enabled MFA, that was a problem because we weren't ready for it. But you should look into that. And then definitely look at creating a break glass account that allows you to get in around MFA in case there's an MFA outage that causes you not to be able to get in. You need one account with a very strong password locked in a safe someplace that allows you to log into your tenant and disable MFA if you need to. So I'm a little early, but yeah, that's it. Please fill out your evaluations. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.